Your brand new iPhone deserves the best protection, and the iLune 3-Pack Screen Protector plus 3-Pack Camera Lens Protector has you covered. Don't take risks with your iPhone. Click the link in the video description to shop now on Amazon.
The bullseye on his chest disappeared as 3 shots rang out. Inside the US's first firing squad execution in 15 years. One terrible night 24 years ago, factory worker Brad Sigmund stayed up smoking crack cocaine and planning violent revenge. He was going to kidnap girlfriend Rebecca Barber, who had jilted him after 5 years. But it didn't play out like that. He ended up bludgeoning her parents to death with a baseball bat and shooting her when she jumped from his speeding car to escape. At his 2002 trial, where he was sentenced to the death penalty, he told jurors he had been obsessed with Rebecca, adding, "Do I deserve to die? I probably do." But he added, "I don't want to die, I want to live for my family's sake." On Friday, in a sparse room at Broad River Correctional Institute in Columbia, South Carolina, the double murderer was hooded, strapped into a chair with a red bullseye placed over his chest, and executed for his crime by firing squad. Sigmund, 67, became the first man to be executed this way in the United States in 15 years. Given the choice between a hail of bullets exploding in his heart and either lethal injection or the electric chair, Sigmund put his trust in 3 marksmen. The trio of volunteer prison guards fired at him through a narrow slit in a wall 15 ft away from Sigmund. The news of those shots rang out around the world, heralding a more unforgiving approach to justice in the U.S. President Donald Trump has vowed to restart the federal executions that were paused under former leader Joe Biden 4 years ago. On his first week back in office in January, he signed an executive action telling the Attorney General to pursue the death penalty for all crimes of a severity demanding its use. But as protesters demonstrated outside the South Carolina jail where Sigmund was executed, his attorney Bo King called for an end to capital punishment in the U.S., branding it a barbaric, state-sanctioned atrocity. King had argued his client had an undiagnosed mental illness and succumbed to a psychotic episode following organic brain damage and grief from his violent childhood. He added, the jury that sentenced him had no idea of how severely compromised his mental health was, or that he was probably incompetent even to stand trial. Sigmund was allowed a hood to cover his eyes and the choice of a final meal. He was given 4 pieces of Kentucky Fried Chicken, mashed potato and cheesecake before heading to the chair in a black jumpsuit. A prison worker then pulled up a horizontal slit in a wall to reveal the barrels of the rifles. The chair Sigmund was strapped into had a tray underneath it to catch blood and was opposite the electric chair, which was covered up. The death chamber was filled by a tense silence, with neither the witnesses nor Sigmund knowing when the triggers would be pulled. Associated Press reporter Jeffrey Collins, who was watching his 11th death row execution, said, "There was no warning or countdown. The abrupt crack of the rifles startled me. And the white target with the red bullseye that had been on his chest, standing out against his black prison jumpsuit, disappeared instantly as Sigmund's whole body flinched." Less than a minute later, a doctor examined Sigmund's body and declared him dead at 6:08 p.m. The .308 Winchester tap urban bullets, which explode on impact inside the body, had been as lethal as they are designed to be. But Sigmund's lawyer King thought that his client's arm trembled as if he was trying to break free from the restraints once they had gone in. He added, "It is unfathomable that, in 2025, South Carolina would execute one of its citizens in this bloody spectacle." Another witness, journalist Anna Dobbins, also suggested there had been some movement. She said, "His arms flexed. There was something in his midsection that moved. I'm not necessarily going to call them breaths, I don't really know, but there was some movement that went on there for 2 or 3 seconds." Collins, who has also seen the lethal injection and the electric chair used, felt that the firing squad was much quicker. The aim of the prison guards was certainly better than that of Sigmund. In April 2001, high on crack cocaine, he decided to take revenge on Rebecca for jilting him. He planned to kidnap his girlfriend, shoot her then shoot himself. Sigmund later told cops that if he couldn't have her, nobody could. He tied up Rebecca's parents Gladys, 59, and David Lark, 62, at their rural property in Greenville County, South Carolina, and hit them both around the head 9 times each until they were dead. Sigmund then took David's gun, waited for Rebecca to come home, and then bundled her into his SUV. She knew she had to escape. As they sped along a South Carolina highway at 60 mph, Rebecca leapt from the car and made a desperate dash for her life. Sigmund chased his victim down, firing at least 3 shots, but she was only hit in the foot. Despite the unfathomable crimes inflicted on Rebecca, now 59, and her parents, she did not agree with his life being extinguished. Speaking publicly for the first time about the killings, she said, "I don't think somebody being put to death is gonna bring me closure. It bothers me and gives me anxiety about him being put to death, and especially him picking the firing squad." Ever since he was found guilty of murder in 2002, Sigmund has been waiting on death row. He admitted killing the defenseless David and Gladys, a hard-working, God-fearing couple who had worked in a metals factory and raised 5 children in a rural part of South Carolina. But after being incarcerated, Sigmund found religion and expressed remorse for his crimes. Rebecca said, "The Bible tells you, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but if you read on down in there it says, 'Revenge is not mine, says the Lord, revenge is God's.'" Not everyone in her family agrees. "I don't think somebody being put to death is gonna bring me closure." Prior to the execution, Rebecca's son Ricky Sims, 40, objected to Sigmund's attempts to appeal against the death penalty. He said, "He's just trying to prolong something that should have been done 20 years ago." Before leaving office, President Joe Biden had commuted 37 out of 40 federal death sentences to life in prison. But Sigmund was on South Carolina's execution list and did not receive a reprieve. It is one of 27 U.S. states which currently maintain the death penalty, and each of them has been grappling with the most reliable means of carrying out that sentence. In 1983, it took 24 minutes for John Louis Evans III to die on the electric chair. Eyewitnesses reporting the stomach-churning smell of burnt flesh each time the high-voltage shocks failed to finish him off in Alabama. 5 years later, 2 tubes administering a lethal injection to Raymond Landry in Texas came loose, with one squirting the deadly mixture over nearby witnesses. South Carolina wanted to make sure its firing squad at the Broad River Correctional Institute in Columbia did not fail. There was to be no chance of stray bullets hitting any bystanders. The witnesses sat behind 3-inch-thick bulletproof glass as the firing squad stood behind a brick wall. The U.S. has struggled to get hold of the lethal sedatives due to export bans, but Trump wants his chief legal advisor to do everything possible to increase the supply. The president has made it clear he wants to speed up the rate of executions, with over 2,000 U.S. prisoners on death row. There might be more joining them. Trump last week called for all cop killers to be given the death penalty and recently suggested drug dealers should face state-sanctioned killing. According to opinion polls, the majority of Americans agree with him, with 53% supporting capital punishment. In Britain, the thirst for no-nonsense justice is even greater. A sample of 2,000 adults in the UK revealed that 55% supported the return of capital punishment, which was abolished in 1965. Murderers Peter Anthony Allen and Gwyn Owen were the last criminals to be condemned to death in Britain at their trial in 1964. The Sun recently reported how Britain is considering importing the Texan correctional policy of tying an offender's release date to work done in prison. But a return to the death penalty is unlikely here, because both Labour MPs and the Conservatives are opposed. And campaigners against capital punishment have argued that there will always be a risk of wrongful execution. It is believed that around 21 men who were put to death in the U.S. since 1980, one might have been innocent of their crimes. Even though Sigmund selected death by firing squad, he certainly did not want to die. The last words he asked to be said on his behalf were, "I want my closing statement to be one of love and a calling to my fellow Christians to help us end the death penalty. I've now watched through glass and bars as 11 men were put to death at a South Carolina prison. None of the previous 10 prepared me for watching the firing squad death of Brad Sigmund. I've witnessed 3 different methods, 9 lethal injections, and an electric chair execution. I can still hear the thunk of the breaker falling 21 years later. The firing squad is certainly faster and more violent than lethal injection. It's a lot more tense, too. My heart started pounding a little after Sigmund's lawyer read his final statement. The hood was put over his head, and an employee opened the shade that shielded where the 3 prison system volunteer shooters were. About 2 minutes later, they fired. There was no warning or countdown. The abrupt crack of the rifles startled me, and the white target with the red bullseye that had been on his chest, standing out against his black prison jumpsuit, disappeared instantly as Sigmund's whole body flinched. I tried to keep track, all at once, of the digital clock on the wall to my right, Sigmund to my left, the small, rectangular window with the shooters and the witnesses in front of me. A jagged red spot about the size of a small fist appeared where Sigmund was shot. His chest moved 2 or 3 times. Apart from the rifle crack, there was no sound. A doctor came out in less than a minute, and his examination took about a minute more. Sigmund was declared dead at 6:08 p.m. Then we left through the same door we came in. The sun was setting. The sky was a pretty pink and purple, a stark contrast to the death chamber's fluorescent lights, gray firing squad chair, and block walls that reminded me of a 1970s doctor's office. I remember other executions. I've seen family members of victims stare down a killer on the gurney. I've seen a mother shed tears as she watched her son die, almost close enough to touch if the glass and bars weren't in the way. Like that thunk of the breaker in 2004, I won't forget the crack of the rifles on Friday and that target disappearing. Also etched in my mind, Sigmund talking or mouthing toward his lawyer, trying to let him know he was okay before the hood went on.